In this edition of Garden Talk with the Tulsa Master Gardeners, we talk about fungal disease in tomatoes, planning your vegetable garden, and answer your questions about dealing with insects on your indoor plants and how to keep your birds happy this time of year. Welcome to Garden Talk.
Hey everybody, glad you're back, glad you're here. Our Tulsa Master Gardener podcast, Garden Talk.
Garden Talk, here we go.
Garden Talk. Tom Ingram here with Brian Jervis.
Howdy, howdy.
And we got garden season on the horizon. We're not quite there yet. So what we're going to do is, we love our tomatoes. Right?
Tomatoes, job security, Tom.
Job security for the horticulture department here. Anyway, but yes, we love tomatoes, but tomatoes are kind of problematic. They can be problematic. They're kind of fussy, kind of persnickety, if you will. And so we're going to, for the next 3 podcasts, we're going to talk about tomato disease, break it up into 3. The first one, today we're going to talk about fungal diseases in tomatoes. And then next time we'll talk about virus and bacteria and nematodes. And then we'll move on and we'll talk about kind of non-infectious disease.
Yeah, cat facing, cracking, things like that. Things that are not fungi or bacteria or viruses.
Just stuff that happens and how to maybe prevent that.
So that's a good lineup. I mean, you know, tomatoes are always fun, and like I said, job security. And I happen to bring the compendium for tomatoes right there. And so, as you can tell, tomatoes has a lot of problems. We're crazy as gardeners. This just proves it. A book this size that has, that many tomato problems, we don't need to dig in that much with them. But these compendiums are done on at the scientific level, and they have everything that it could be, that our issues could be, and it kind of breaks them down, talks about them when they grow them in plates. So homeowners don't necessarily need to get that involved. Where we do need to get involved are simple fact sheets that we have, and we've kind of based our series of 3 on our tomato fact sheets that we do have. So our first one again is the fungal issues, and we'll talk about 4. I think we have 4 in this grouping, and that will specific diseases that are caused by fungus. So we'll kind of do that next week next month with the bacteria and viruses, and then the week after, the time after that will be the non-infectious ones. So I think it's a good lineup. There is a lot of problems with tomatoes. Again, gardeners are crazy. We want to succeed, but
we like our tomatoes. Man,
that fresh cut tomato picked and put on a tomato sandwich or a bacon tomato and sandwich, it makes me ready to eat, and I understand why we love our tomatoes after that.
I love the cherry ones just because when you're out there picking, you can just
pop them and go.
About half of what you pick makes it into the house because you're just snacking right there, nice fresh tomato. But anyway, so our pest of the week this week is fungal.
Fungal problems,
Fungal disease in tomatoes. And our hope here is that we can just give you some basic tools. So oftentimes here we get people that'll send us a picture or an email or bring a plant in, and what's the question? What's wrong? Well, if you have some tools and maybe you can kind of look at something and go, that looks fungal. And they said, do this for fungal. So, just some basic shortcuts, basically, so you don't have to know all that's in that book.
Some ideas, and that's not to say that we won't have all 3 in our tomato plant at that point. But, all 3 problems. But, if we know we've had these 4 we're going to talk about fungal problems, then one of the major ways to help that, we can put down a chemical. Whether it's an organic fungicide or a conventional fungicide, that's going to help kind of act as a sunscreen, kind of help protect that leaf, as we get splashing from the soil coming up to the leaves. If we've got a fungicide on there, think of that as a sunscreen that helps protect that. So, we're going to be applying that to most any of these fungal diseases that we have.
So that's probably a good place to start before we get into individuals, is talk about the disease triangle, because that's key on pretty much any disease on any plant, and it's not that hard to understand.
Yeah, it is. And if you see on the screen that we have up, on a disease triangle, you have 3 legs on a triangle. You have a host, in this
which is your plant.
Is the plant, a susceptible host, to be specific. So that susceptible host is susceptible to that disease. So we have a susceptible host. you have a virulent pathogen, so a pathogen that's out there ready to attack that host, and then you have the proper environment. So you have the three things, and what our goal is as gardeners is to break one of those chains or cut out one of those three things, whether it's the host, whether it's the pathogen, or whether it's the environment. That will cause less disease. Right. If we have all three of those, then we are going to have the disease. Right. So with that in mind, you know, that's an easy explanation that, you know, we go in and we select a tomato plant that is resistant to Fusarium. Right. So we're cutting out that susceptible host because it's not susceptible to that particular strain. So we'll have less disease. So or watering our tomatoes. If we're watering from the top and we're getting moisture on the leaf, it's holding that moisture in, creating a longer time period during that day to make that proper environment. Right. And if we cut that out, if we dry it out, we get hot, we get dry, we're going to have less proper environment, therefore less disease. Right. So that's kind of an idea. And then on the pathogen side, if we put a fungicide down, that sunscreen that I was talking about, that's going to help keep that pathogen from getting into that plant. Right. So we're going to have less virulent pathogen that's able to get into that plant because of that sunscreen or that fungicide we put down, right. Then we're going to have less disease. So that's a 10-minute talk on a disease triangle. But if we think about it and we kind of relate to that, we can make some decisions to help us out to have less disease. Well,
you mentioned environment. I mean, kind of controlling and manipulating the environment on these fungal diseases is key. You mentioned the water and the moisture, but a lot of these diseases, the fungal diseases, are soil borne, yeah. So if you have an overhead sprinkling system or even the rain, as that comes down and hits the soil, it splashes that fungus up onto the plant and then it can spread. So if you can interrupt that environmental factor, for example, don't use overhead sprinkling, use a drip system or hand water or something. Right. And especially mulch. Put the mulch down, that's going to create a barrier between the soil and the air, etc. So when it rains or it hits it, it's not going to splash back up on your plant.
Yeah, mulch is a great thing, and you know I love using pretty quick composting mulch, like wheat straw, barley straw. There's quite a few different clean straws. You don't want to put grass or just some hay out there because it's got some weed seeds in it. It could have some weed seeds in it. So be careful about that. But yeah, the idea of once the water rolls off the leaf and it bounces, or you get a direct drop that hits the soil and bounces, it's going to get on that. And just little things like that, believe it or not, will help you later on in the end.
Right. And another environmental factor you can be in charge of, manipulate, is crop rotation. Because these can build up over a period of time. If you plant a tomato that, say you had Fusarium Wilt or the other one of these factors on there, and it just kind of got started a little bit, well, then you put tomatoes in the next year, it's going to get a little stronger, and then the next year it's going to grow the problem, kind of like we are with antibiotics. If we take too many antibiotics, we're kind of lessening their effects.
Correct.
So crop rotation, and was it every 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, if you can get by every year, the better off you'll be. But we've got containers. We've got big pots that we like our tomatoes in, and we can't put anything else in there. So we have to kind of deal with it. So we are looking at the fungicides a little more. We're looking at the mulch is definitely important. And then if we get issues after that second, third, or fourth year, sometimes we may just not be able to grow tomatoes in there. We may either have to pull that soil out and put new in, or grow something else in there that's not related to a tomato, and that should help you over a few years.
And not to get too technical, but it wouldn't be just tomatoes. It would be plants that are in the tomato family.
Yeah, potatoes are solanaceous. In that family of tomatoes. There's quite a few peppers are another one of those that a lot of our problems that we're going to talk about today are in potatoes and peppers and eggplants and other things, because they are within that family. So if you can move or rotate out of that particular area into something, say a corn or something, a cabbage or something that is different, then that'll help you. Also, things that'll help you is organic matter. Keep that soil fresh, keep it turned under, and keep disease out of there, and that's obviously going to help you later on.
Well, I think in our last episode we talked about planting your garden. One of the master gardeners, I love their idea. They've got like a fairly large rectangular garden. They've got it split up in quarters, and each year they just
kind of move over,
rotate a quarter, and so
Yeah.
they're kind of minimizing, they're manipulating the environment
Yeah.
to minimize their disease problem.
And that is really heavy on nematodes, and we'll talk about in a couple later from here.
Right.
But nematodes can build up, and sometimes we get them in there, and it may take 3 or 4 years to get them out, but. Rotation is good. Rotation is a good thing for us. But if we've got a sprinkler system, keep those dry. And if you do have to water above, or your sprinkler hits it, water in the morning. We say that all the time. Water in the morning when there's dew out there already because it's wet, and let it dry out. Maybe 10 or 11 in the middle of the day and start drying, and it'll be dry until later on that next night where the dew forms. So that's a longer period where it's dry. Less disease because it's dry because we're taking that proper environment out of there.
As compared to watering at night, which is tempting because we get home from work or something, we have time to it's easier to stay up later than get up earlier.
That's right. That's right.
But you water at night, and so you get them wet, they're going to be damp all night long. And so you've got a warm, moist environment there on your leaves, and they're going to love it. The fungi are going to love it and just kind of explode on you.
Yeah. Another thing we can do, that if that splash from the rain is getting on the leaves, and our plants are pretty tall, we can go ahead and remove some of those bottom leaves.
Right.
Bring it up a little bit where that doesn't have that chance to splash on there.
Right.
A lot of those leaves at that point, we're 50 days, 60 days in after we planted, they may start curling a little, or maybe they start browning or something. We can go ahead and simply remove a few of those. That way that plant's, 18 inches, that first leaf is 18 inches above splash or 12, then that's going to help us as well. So those are simple things that kind of relate to all of these next 4 diseases that we're going to talk about, but they all are good things to do. And then we can get into fungicides later, but I think the fungicides may need to be your last resort. There's really no need if we're doing all these proper things. You may get a disease or two, but or we may get an outbreak of Fusarium Wilt or Southern Blight. Then we may go ahead and look at a fungicide. But by that point, if we don't scout, if we don't get them early enough, it may be too late, and we may end up having to pull that plant out anyway, just because we didn't keep up with it and didn't pay attention. Right. So a lot of different things we can do that I think will help you. A lot of them are obvious, but obvious we don't always think of. So that's why we're trying to mention everything.
Well, so we kind of covered general fungal ways to handle it, but let's talk about some individuals that are the kind of the top 4 maybe that might see in our garden.
Yeah. Now, before we go, I start squirming when people bring in tomato plants because a lot of these problems look pretty similar, or there may be 2 problems on one plant.
Right.
So with that in mind. Yes, it's important to identify which one we have, but it's more important to make sure we're doing the right things to combat these various problems that we have. Now, after talking, if we still are not quite sure of what we have, we do have a disease lab. That's pretty nice. It's pretty good thing if we're not comfortable saying it is definitely Fusarium, or we kind of are curious and want to know. That way, if we do need to rotate them out, we can. If it's a soil-borne, we have that ability to send that up to campus. Right. And what they'll do, they'll take a cutting or plate it in an auger, put it in a grow chamber, and it'll grow that disease or that virus or that whatever it is. It'll grow into that plate. Then they can tell us for sure that is Fusarium or that is Septoria. Right. At that point. So keep that in mind, have it in the back of your mind, and I think in the end we're still going to be able to grow tomatoes and still going to be all right.
A lot of tomatoes out there.
Yeah, so it's a fun tomato. It's a fun plant to try, but again it can pull your hair out as well.
Well, the first one we're going to talk about, you mentioned it, the Fusarium Wilt.
Yep.
There's a picture of it that's this yellowing. You got a plant that just all of a sudden starts looking bad.
Just doesn't look too good.
Right.
It's kind of early in the spring, so the wilting's not as bad as it would be if we got it in June and July when it's hot.
Right.
But we're still going to see some yellowing with this, and the yellowing follows the necrosis or the dying of those leaflets.
Right.
So this is probably one of our more common ones that we get earlier on.
Right.
Simply go in and prune out the bad. That'll tell you if it's going to be able to survive. You prune it out and you get new green growth that looks pretty good. You may be able to limp it along until June, July, till you can get some fruit. And that's kind of what we're at. That is what we're after. Right. So if it's pretty bad, percentage-wise, half, I think, is the number. If we're having to cut out a lot, then more than likely we just need to remove it and go ahead and plant again. We can still get some new growth. Maybe go away from that variety or go find those plants in the nursery with F, F1, F2, and F3. So
even on seeds, if you buy seeds, you'll see those disease codes, which we talked about a week or two ago.
Yeah, a while back.
But they're seeds for plants that have been kind of had a resistance bred into them.
Yeah.
So if you've had a problem with Fusarium, or if you suspect Fusarium, like the next year or whatever, you can get those resistant plants or seeds.
And have less issues.
Kind of help, which gets back to that disease triangle where we're planting a host.
Trying to get out of that host that's susceptible.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. Fusarium. So if you see something like that, you likely have Fusarium wilt.
Yep.
Another one is Southern Blight. Southern Blight's kind of nasty.
Yeah, Southern Blight's one that where you'll start seeing it's down at that soil line. You'll start seeing where it's as in the picture where it's just kind of
it's like a lesion.
Got a lesion's a good term.
They call it a water-filled lesion. It's kind of a juicy, squishy kind of part of the plant, and if it gets this far, I don't know if there's a whole heck of a lot.
There's not, and this particular one's kind of mature. It's a mature tomato, so it's probably in January or July, August time frame. And if you're getting something this bad and you're starting to see the lesions, you definitely go ahead and get that out of there. Right. You're not going to get any fruit out of that. There may be some fruit on there, maybe green, that you can go ahead and pull. It's perfectly fine to eat. But for the most part, if you see stems like this, at the base, that more than likely is going to be Southern Blight and having those issues.
Right. You don't want it to spread. You kind of want to minimize that spread.
So. Yeah, and this not being as much of foliar disease, a fungicide won't do a lot of good at this point because it's soil-borne. It's already attacked that stem. No matter how much fungicide you put on, you're not going to get any control or suppression. It's already done what it's going to do.
Nothing's going to be going up to.
Yeah. So this, and it'll start kind of wilting a little bit. We mentioned wilting prior, but it'll start wilting a little bit. But more than likely, once you see the white lesions, get it out of there and do other things. You can put
do other things. Shop for tomatoes at the grocery store.
Go to the store and buy them. No, it's not quite that bad, but Southern Blight is a pretty common one that we have, and then we want to rotate that away.
Right.
Yep.
And then early blight, which I think is kind of fascinating because this is a pretty obvious symptom here. These leaves with these dark brown circles and
halos.
Like in the kind of blow up of it, they're kind of concentric circles.
So circular.
So that's pretty easy to identify.
And it is pretty common, and this is a good foliar disease, foliar fungus that we can get some control a little bit with fungicides. We can help protect those a little bit, like we mentioned earlier, bringing those leaves up. But if it gets this bad, what I would do, I'd probably prune it out, prune those limbs out, and if we still have some limbs left, then let it go and see what happens, protect it, and see if we can get there. But early blight's one that it doesn't necessarily occur early on, but it'll occur throughout the season. But the thing is, are those rings that you were talking about, those circles that you see. Sometimes you'll see even more defined dark areas with yellowing around those outside where it's kind of infected. But for the most part, you are going to see those round spots on there. That'll happen. But again, prune them out and get on a pretty good fungicide schedule, again, whether organic or conventional. Should help.
We talked about in the previous episode soil testing, et cetera. This is one where a nitrogen deficiency contributes
Yeah.
If it's not getting all the nitrogen it needs, it's already kind
of
of
stressed, if
puny
you
or
will,
peaked or whatever.
yeah.
It makes it more susceptible to
Yeah,
this
so
disease.
so do have our nutrient levels right, which we didn't mention earlier. Which, you know, for most of it, if we've got a good, healthy, growing plant,
Right.
it's gonna be able to fight off a little more than it
Just
it
like
could
us,
if it was
if we're healthy and in
stressed.
good shape, the cold isn't going to affect us very much. But if we're not,
Correct.
that cold is going to take
Going to
us out.
sniffles, and then you're going to go. And if we don't do anything about it, it's going to get worse. So yeah, you'll see this. This is pretty much a guarantee. You'll see these problems.
Right.
But do what we were talking about earlier on, and then, you know, get it on a fungicide schedule, and that should help you.
This last one, I think, is Septoria leaf spot. That's pretty common.
Pretty common.
Pretty common.
We see it to varying degrees, whether
Right.
it's one limb or the whole plant.
Right. And it'll start at the bottom
Yeah.
because it's soil borne, and that water splashing on there splashes it up on those leaves.
Yeah. So, you know, smaller leaves go back if you can, Tom. Compared to a larger spot
Right.
with our early blight, but now go back the other way. So Septoria's got the little bitty spots on
Right.
it. They can get into a bigger area like we did at the tip here, but for the most part, you know, pretty common. This is a great photo showing these little round specks can coalesce into a bigger spot, but you'll see yellowing. This plant may have not been as healthy. So it was growing slower, therefore the disease got in.
Right.
Or we had a good, you know, wet spring, it's going to have more of these. So again, you can try to prune this out a little bit, but do the cultural practices that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
Get it on a fungicide schedule. You should be able to decrease this a little bit.
So that's the big four. So
Yep.
back to just review our disease triangle.
Yep.
Being able to manipulate one of those, manipulate the environment, get a disease-resistant version of that plant if you can, and should be good.
Hope for the best. I mean,
for
it
the best.
is. I mean, once you understand that disease triangle and kind of have your tools around, like, you know, keeping them mulched in and then keeping our fungicide spray on there, that'll help us mostly. We'll be better off for that.
Right.
Yeah.
keep them healthy.
Yep. Keep them healthy.
All right, so now's the time. It still feels a little early, but
Yeah.
if it's a good time to like work on planning your garden. A lot of us don't like to plan. We just want to get out there and, well, I'll just do what I did last year
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever. But if you give a little forethought into it, you can plan your vegetable garden or your flower garden or whatever. But one of the first things we talked about last week, soil test. Get the soil test. That'll help you with all your nutrients to plan your year out. When am I going to fertilize? How much am I going to fertilize? Do I need to fertilize?
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So soil test would be the first thing.
Yeah.
Right? And then like the location. You gotta like where, if you're new to this, it's like where am I going to plant my garden? How am I going to plant my garden?
Need a sunny location. That comes to mind when we're talking tomatoes and things. So
Yeah, you got like 8, 10, 12 hours of sun.
as much full sun as we can get.
Right. I know my vegetable garden, I'm limited by trees. I only get from about 9 till 2, and they don't grow
As well.
well. But that's all I got.
You don't have a choice.
That's all I got.
You don't have a choice.
Can't start cutting trees down. So
Yeah.
it's picking crops that might do better with a lesser sun,
Yeah.
and just realizing that, at least for me, that my tomato plants are going to do okay, but they're not going to be like these big, giant, robust.
And in general, leaf size has a lot to do with it on how much sun it needs. The bigger the leaf, the less sun it needs. That's just generic. But for the most part, all of our vegetables, if we're talking vegetables, they're going to need a lot of sun. They're going to need the more sun they're going to. If you've got an area like yours and you can put them further back where there's more sun, I would go with a sunny location more than anything. That'd be the first thing I would look for.
So location, and then water. Water
Yeah.
is maybe sometimes we don't think about it ahead of time, but you're going to be spending time watering, or you're going to have to put in some sort of irrigation.
Yeah.
So water is going to be key to how much time, and they're going to need the water. So.
Yeah, and if we were tired of pulling hoses and dragging hoses back to the back where our vegetable garden is, now may be a good time to put in a water line. It's pretty simple. You don't have to do much with it. Maybe just get it right underneath the surface, because it can be that simple. Or you can do a full-blown water line out and a faucet at your garden. So I mean, now would be a good time to do that, and at least think about that.
Yeah, think about maybe this year you want to install a nice drip irrigation or something out there. And I haven't done that yet. I still
Still thinking about it.
I still like to hand water, but anyway. But think about that, and then the types of garden. You know, a lot of times we'll get people saying, "Well, I don't have a yard. I have an apartment, or maybe I'm renting my house. I can't do it." Well, you can. There's raised beds or in ground for like the homeowners, but we got containers. We got vertical gardens. You can grow build
it up on a
vertical garden
Yep.
or. Lots of different types of garden, and we got information on our website.
Yep.
Types of gardens that hopefully maybe kind of give you some ideas. Like, well, I could do that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's as simple as getting a 5-gallon bucket from one of the Home Depot or Lowe's or something.
Putting a few holes in
Putting
it.
holes in some soil, and you can grow some nice tomatoes
Yeah,
and something like that. So
you
you're without excuse.
Yeah, and we know you like growing and like gardening because you're watching this.
That's right.
So I mean, there's ways to do it. I mean, whether you are in that apartment where you may not get a lot of sun, put it in a pot, move it in and out if you have to.
Right.
So you can do it. You
You'd
can
be
try.
surprised
Yeah.
at
What you can do.
And herbs, even maybe you could grow some herbs if you wanted to.
Yep.
With it, they're pretty low maintenance. So there's lots of ideas. And speaking of herbs, one of the steps is, what do I want to grow? Well, basically, grow what you're going to eat.
What I want to eat, yeah.
Right.
What do I want to enjoy, and you know that's definitely a good one. You want to put something in that's pretty easy. You don't want to fail. I mean, tomatoes we talked about earlier. I don't want to say you're going to fail, but probably going to fail on tomatoes. So put something in that will succeed. That's pretty easy to grow. Onions are pretty easy to grow. Potatoes are kind of fun. I like potatoes because you can plant them early. Plant them
St. Patrick's Day.
St. Patrick's Day is kind of the wives' tale there, and usually it'll take about 60 to 80 days to grow. Then you can harvest, and then you can put tomatoes in or something else in. So you can kind of get 2 crops with the potatoes if you can get them in early enough, get them growing. So yeah, what will you eat? What will you enjoy?
Well, it's like one of the gardener's mistakes. You know, we got all these big plans, we plant all this stuff, and then all of a sudden we've got 12 tomato plants, and they're all doing great. And our neighbors have eaten all the tomatoes they ever want to eat, and we've still got tomatoes. So, you know, think about the crop and what's going to harvest and how much it's going to be, and then also space. I mean, we'll go and we'll buy, if you start from seed or whatever, we'll go and we'll buy a tomato plant, and it's like this big.
Yeah.
Be mindful of how big it's going to get, especially squash. Like squash or cucumbers.
Squash can get 4 foot wide.
Yeah, you plant that nice little plant, and then all of a sudden it's taken. Vine's taken over.
Vine crops, vine crops as well. So yeah, again, good time to kind of think about that and figure out what I want, and you know, don't go into the nurseries and say I want this, and this, and then oh Lord, what am I going to do with it all now?
Well, I've done that before, especially looking at the seed catalogs, and there's like I want that, and that, and then you get the seeds in, and then you're like.
And you got room for 2 plants.
Where am I going to? I can't grow all this stuff. I'm going to have 2 plants of each if I grow all this stuff. So.
And now's also a good time to start working your ground. You know, you can start tilling if you need to. Start thinking about what organic matter you're going to put in. Right. So, I mean, my vegetable garden right now has got a little bit of henbit in it. It's just kind of sitting there. I'm not growing anything now. So, I want to definitely work that ground before I start seeing flowers. Whether it's, you know, the henbit flowers, the purple flowers, or, you know, some grassy weeds that we've got in there. So if we're starting to, and these weeds will start producing flowers pretty quick. Right. So once we start seeing that, till that up, break that up, go hand pull if you need to.
Right. Everybody's favorite.
Yeah, or, you know, put some vinegar down, or, you know, herbicide or anything, whatever you do to kill those. But it's a good time to go ahead and get that in and get them tilled in that way. Right. You know, it's just that time where we're starting to think about it.
Because the season's coming. If you're growing a cool season crop, we're looking at them like mid-February.
Middle of February.
In the ground, mid-February.
Yep.
And then our warmer season crops like mid-April.
Yep.
So it's like if you're doing the mid-February cool season crop, you probably need to be getting your seeds started.
Start thinking about it
now indoors. And then
30 days is kind of a good time from seed to go to ready. I mean, depending, you know, average we're talking tomatoes and squash is not quite a 30-day transplant, but you know, some of our warm season vegetables, you know, we're looking at putting them in the ground, you know, starting them or seeding them in the house. Middle February, 1st of March, that should get us that 30 days, 40 days prior to. Right. So we're not quite there in January, but we will be before long.
Yeah, and we'll talk about starting seeds in an episode coming up pretty quick on how to get started on that. So anyway, we can still be processing and planning some of this stuff for our gardens.
Yep, for sure.
All right, so our questions of the week this week, the first one comes from Lindsay. She says, I have some sort of small insect on one of my indoor plants. What's a safe way to get rid of those pests now? And it's an example of like nice indoor plant, but if we have some pests or just like what's the best practice to do with these?
Something comes along all the time. I mean, there's insects, maybe aphids. Aphids come to mind.
We probably have brought those in the house.
We did. They brought them in back in November when they brought them in, and because there's a lot of plant insects don't live in the house, so they've got them from the outside, and we bring them in.
Spider mites.
Same thing I was talking to my wife about the other day. We need to set our plants out. It was sunny last Saturday, and we should have put our plants outside, treated them if we had any insects that were on there, and then water them. I don't water my plants too often. I've got them in a big enough pot, so maybe we have watered them once or twice just to get them by, but I need to take them back outside and give them a good drench, give them a good flush of that. That helps get all the all the salts and things out, but also will allow me to look and see if there's any aphids or any other insects.
You can hose them off.
Water them off, hose them off, but we'll get them watered in, get them dripped, get them drained, and then bring them back in, and that'll get us till about the time we're ready to set them back outside. But you can do it from inside if the plant's too big or you don't want to take the time. I mean, there's some neem oil or some insecticidal soap that you can bring them to the middle of your room and spray, but it's a lot easier to pull them outside, spray, let them dry out, and then bring them back in that way. So you don't have to, but just depending on how much work you want to do. But yeah, it's things we don't think of, and then we go back and look at a plant and it just looks bad, wilted, and nasty, and aphids came in and attacked it. So yeah, we just got to kind of keep an eye on it. Luckily, a lot of our house plants don't have a lot of insect issues. Yeah.
But just the ones that we brought from outside.
Yeah, that's right.
We brought them in.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, next question. Comes from Alan. Says, how do I keep the birds happy this time of year? Good question.
It is a good question.
We love the birds, and they're pretty, and a lot of their food sources are gone now, but they're no different than we are. Food, water, shelter.
The three things that's needed.
Yeah, well, that's what I need. I need food, water, shelter.
And no cats.
And no cats. Well, personally, I agree with that, but for the birds.
Yeah. I've got cats at the house to kind of keep mice and things in check outside. They're outdoor cats, so we got a bird feeder and set them out for the kids, and then noticed they wasn't coming around, and then before long we noticed the cat sitting right underneath that bird feeder, just waiting for the meal. So it is a challenge, but back to your three things that you mentioned. If we have those three things, we'll have birds. We'll have more birds.
They're looking. I'm always amazed. I can tell when my feeder's empty and when it's not, because
they're flying around.
Yeah, if I haven't seen birds in a while, I guarantee you the feeder's empty. And if I fill up that feeder, hour or two,
right back.
There they are. Word travels. And
what is funny, Tom, that I've noticed and didn't believe until I saw it, is the birds will eat different things. They go after specific seeds, not just our finch and our what's that thistle that the finches like. So if you have a wide array of seeds, you're going to get a wide array of birds, and that's fun. That is fun to see and watch. And what better to do on a snowy day is watch the birds. So pretty fun.
They are kind of fun, but you're right. You can buy different. You can't buy just sunflower seeds.
Yep.
That's going to attract a different type of bird than the seed mixes.
Right.
If you will, the mixes are you're gonna have all different kinds, small ones, large ones, et cetera, et cetera.
But they need some water. They do need some water and some brush or something, or some trees to get in, or some limbs to get in, or something to kind of get out of the weather. But food, water, and shelter.
Food, water, and shelter.
Yep.
Speaking of, it's about lunchtime.
It's getting close, isn't it? Getting close.
All right. Well, that wraps up for today. We appreciate you all being here. Hopefully you learned something. And again, next week we'll move on with tomatoes, another disease on tomatoes, and kind of get you all set for garden season.
That's right. It'll be here. We're hoping. We're ready for it.
Yeah. So see you next time.
Signing off. Thank you.